Howdy folks, welcome to Live at the Lazy T Ranch. I'm Ron Wilson, Poet Laureate. Today I want to talk about a very special gift that was given to me recently, and this is it. Hope you can see that this is an antique piece of barbed wire mounted on this board. And this is not just any old piece of barbed wire. This is a very special piece of barbed wire that goes back to the authentic history of the Western Cattle Trail in Kansas. Now, this relates to a couple of terms that you don't hear much about nowadays, and the two terms are cattle pool and drift fence. So what is a cattle pool? Well, it is not a swimming pool for your cows in your backyard. Imagine Bessie the cow jumping into your swimming pool. Cannonball! That would be a big splash. Oh, that is not what a cattle pool was. A cattle pool referred to the simple practice of cattlemen combining their herds and cooperatively managing large numbers of cattle. And this was pretty common in the 1800s. This was the time of open range. So there were not individual pastures or parcels that were owned by people. The range was open, and yet several cattlemen could come together and combine their herds and make a large number of herds and then share the cost of managing them. And in the later 1800s, the cattle pools became fairly common. It was a smart, efficient way of managing the cattle over large space, and some cattle pools became formally organized, had officers and directors, and a participant paid based on the number of cattle that they had as part of the pool. So this worked pretty well in the 1860s and 1870s. Along came increased pressure from settlement and so forth, and we saw the cattle pools wane and go away. The second term was drift fence. Again, this was an era of open range. So a drift fence was a structure used to keep cattle from drifting into where they should not be. And the drift fences were particularly used in wintertime to keep from scattering a herd during winter weather conditions. So that's where the terms cattle pool and drift fence came about. So this is an actual piece of barbed wire which came from the cattle pool drift fence that served the Western Cattle Trail in 1882-1883. And this appears to be handmade barbed wire using the original patent for barbed wire that was filed by J.F. Glidden in 1876. A roll of this barbed wire was found on a farm near the Lane-Gove County line. It was saved by my friend Joel Herndon, president of the Dodge City chapter of the Western Cattle Trail Association. He mounted it on this board and presented it to me and others in appreciation for our work with the Western Cattle Trail. So this is an authentic souvenir from the Western Cattle Trail of 150 years ago. And it comes from the only known roll of such wire known to exist in the modern era. So it's a true souvenir of Western history in Kansas. Let me finish this episode of Live at the Lazy T Ranch with this poem I wrote about the Western Kansas cattle pool drift fence. Back in the 1800s was a time of open range when cattle roaming free were the norm and not considered strange. Some cattlemen came together to pool their cattle herds, sharing costs and labor as cooperation undergirds. They could share territory under cooperative rule and form what was referred to as a cattle pool. One area where it helped to share the expense was construction of a winter barrier known as a drift fence. On the plains of western Kansas 150 years ago, such drift fence was part of the cattleman's portfolio. Then open range came to an end, and cattle pools were no more. Individual ownership became our economy's core, but I'm glad to have a souvenir from these days of consequence, an authentic piece of barbed wire from the Western Cattle Pool drift fence. Folks, thanks for joining us on Live at the Lazy T Ranch. Join us each Tuesday, 1 p.m. Like, comment, share. Till we see you again, happy trails and God bless.